This happened a while ago. I removed names for obvious reasons. My well-to-do brother was going on vacation and requested that I, a teacher, take care of his dogs for the week and a half he'd be gone. Having nothing better to do, I assented and drove myself over to their place in the city suburbs. I thought it would be like a vacation, but soon found that living in someone else's house can actually be boring as hell. I spent most of my time watching his limited cable package, playing his dusty PS2, and eating his food. There were 2 dogs to watch over. Amusingly, my brother had both a giant American bulldog named Lucy, who was 80 pounds of muscle and bone, and an adorable dachshund named Coco that belonged to his fiancée. All I really had to do was keep the dogs fed and watered, and prevent Lucy from killing anyone who had the gall to come near the house. The only annoying thing about my job was that some of the rooms were absolutely filthy. It was so bad that my brother instructed me not to even step foot in either his bedroom or the guest room due to embarrassment about their condition. The living room, kitchen, and basement contained your average millennial sloppiness, but their bedroom was covered floor to ceiling in dirty clothes, crusted plates of food, and trash. The stench of weed was also distinguishable. His guest room was little better, used to hold nearly everything he and his girl had no place for. It was also filled with junk, and I never went near its tiny closet, for fear of being buried in an avalanche of furniture, DVDs, and other crap they didn't need. It was a ridiculous situation for someone as wealthy as my brother seemed to be. I didn't understand why they didn't just hire a Maya. He asked me to stay clear of both rooms, and I was happy to oblige, sleeping instead on the couch in the basement where I could at least move freely without stepping on an old dog turd. The first few days, everything was fine. I generally just dicked around on my phone or the television. I had classes to make for the next year, but even in my supreme boredom I couldn't bring myself to do any real work. And even if I wanted to do on my laptop, I quickly ran into a technical problem. My brother lived in a rougher suburb, so he had 2 small security cameras that connected to an app I could pull up on my phone or laptop. These cameras had motion sensors that would detect when someone came to either the front or back door. Instead of doing their jobs properly, the damn things went off like crazy every quarter hour or so. I received these incessant notifications, motion detected, front door. But whenever I checked the app or the doors themselves, no one was there, and the wound footage showed only empty air. I was tempted to turn the app off completely, but I instead just ignored the constant buzzes on my phone and laptop. The weird stuff started happening on the 3rd night. I had locked everything up and was taking my evening shit in the basement bathroom when I heard the sound of banging glass. It was coming from somewhere outside the house, like someone was clanging to be let in. I was trying to pinpoint where the hell the noise was coming from, but it stopped nearly soon as it started. The dogs, Lucy especially, lost their shit. This was midnight, so I came to the conclusion that I was about to be burgled murdered, but there was no other sounds besides the dogs. Rushing off the toilet, I grabbed my phone and checked the camera app. No one at either door. Realizing I had to do something, I snatched the tiny handgun my brother left me and tentatively made my way out of the basement. Coco followed me, snarling. All the lights were out, just like I left them, but I quickly changed that. I checked the windows on all 3 floors to ensure they were locked. I double-checked the screen doors, too. Everything was latched shut. There was no sign of any forced entry and the backyard was clear. In the darkness outside all I could see was my brother's small storage shed and a ladder he hadn't bothered to put away lying placidly in the grass. The shed was padlocked closed. I thought about calling the police, but even as I considered it I began to doubt what I had heard. Was it really a banging outside of the house? Or had it been something inane, like thunder or the wind? I just couldn't be sure, and my family has always been wary of law enforcement, so I held off on alerting anyone. I sat up with the dogs that night until sleep finally took me. Nothing else happened. I called my brother the next day, and he agreed with me that I shouldn't get too paranoid. He said it was probably for the best not to call the cops, that he hears weird noises in the house all the time because it was built with cheap, rickety materials. Nevertheless, I was on edge. I checked the blinds constantly, and my eyes were glued to the app to make sure no one was crawling around the front or back door. Unfortunately for me, weird shit kept happening. As the week wore on, there was no more banging on glass at nights, but I started to hear something else. At first, I thought it was my own brain making white noise to drown out the quiet, but soon I realized it was coming from the house itself, from inside the walls. It was a static sound that I recognized somehow, but couldn't quite pin down in my mind. It was like an electrical whirring that I could just barely make out when everything was silent in the dead of night, or when the dogs napped during the daytime. It seemed to jump around from spot to spot, but never lasted long. I became nervous, feeling trapped in the place that was supposed to be my vacation home. I didn't leave the house much at that point, but when I did go out to get food or something, the dogs would always follow me to the door and whine more than usual as if they didn't want me to go. I had to close their pen often to keep them from following me around everywhere. Thankfully, they started to calm down merely after about a week of my being there, but I quickly became freaked out by this too. Both Lucy and Coco started sleeping about 18 hours each day. They would flop down next to me in the basement and wouldn't move for what felt like an eternity. Coco especially looked so comatose that I started checking her for a pulse every now and then. I could barely get them to eat or go to the bathroom. In fear of allowing them to just drop dead, I made a vet appointment for both dogs. They ran some routine tests and told me that there was nothing wrong with either dog physically, and that maybe the excitement of a new face had just worn them down. That sounded like the stupidest thing I ever heard, but I had no better explanation. Shit hit the fan in the second week at the house. The app was constantly telling me someone was at the front and back doors, and the dogs kept going back and forth between whining fearfully and snoring in my lap. The whirring sound sent chills down my spine whenever I heard it. I was getting hardly any sleep at all. Every night before bed I checked and rechecked all the windows, some of which didn't have blinds. The unshakable feeling that I was being watched drove me to dread and anxiety. I covered the blindless windows with blankets, and I kept the gun near me 24/7. The place was becoming like a prison, but I felt bound to protect it. One evening, exhaustion overtook me and I collapsed on the couch. The whirring sound woke me up, louder than it had ever been, but this time it was accompanied by footsteps moving within the house. I swear to God they were some heavy footfalls, but they moved so slowly that even in the moment I couldn't accept what I was hearing. Was someone there? The footsteps plodded exceedingly slowly above me in the upstairs where the two restricted rooms were. Suddenly, a sick thought struck me. I hadn't gone up in those rooms hardly at all the past few days. What if someone was hiding in one of them the whole time? They were so disgusting that I thought them off limits, but that didn't mean they were empty. The dogs lay beside me, completely oblivious in their slumber. As silently as I could, I retrieved the gun and my phone and, trembling, made my way to the top floor. I still couldn't call the police. Not until I was sure I wasn't acting crazy. I checked my brother's room first. I was electrified with terror as I opened the door, remembering every horror movie I had ever seen. It was completely empty, full of only trash, crawling ants, and rotten odors, just as he had left it. I just had to check the guest bedroom, and I'd be safe. That's where my phone buzzed. Motion detected, front door. Son of a bitch. If I was maintaining any stealth, it was gone now. I waited for something to happen. A maniac to charge me from the stairs, or the bedroom door. Hell, at this point I wouldn't have been surprised to see an electrical fan demon pop out of the wall whirring at me. But nothing happened. After 5 bone-chilling minutes of silence, I finally gathered the courage to check the front door camera on my phone. As always, an empty porch greeted me. I tried to keep my breathing calm as I opened the door to the guest bedroom. It was also empty. Just junk piled high and no sign of footprints or any whirring sound. My eyes fell on the last spot of the house that I hadn't swept yet, the small closet. I actually started to feel better about the whole situation. I had been so strung out that I had to have been hearing things, and I had no actual evidence of anyone in the house except my untrustworthy ears. I threw open the closet door, and just as I was expecting, there was no one and no thing there. Except a window. A window I hadn't fucking noticed in all of my time at the house. I wanted to strangle whoever built this place. Why put a window in the closet of the spare bedroom? What did that contribute to the aesthetic of the house? The window was unlocked. Someone had cut away the glass just enough to pop a fist-sized piece out and unlatch it. They had replaced that piece carefully, so only a clear investigation would reveal it. But how the hell could a person use a window on the second floor of the house to get in? Unless they were some Assassin's Creed type motherfuckers, they couldn't just climb up the gutter in broad daylight. Then I remembered the ladder in the yard. Not locked up. Just laying in the grass waiting for anybody to come along and make use of it. I cursed my brother. More details came to my fearful eyes. Littering the floor were candy bar wrappers, a dirty blanket, and 2 water bottles filled with pale yellow liquid. My heart sunk further. Someone had been in the house with me and the dogs. It was at this moment that I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Darkness was coming on, and I had no fucking intentions of staying in that house tonight. I had to call the police. My phone buzzed right before the glass shattered. Motion detected, front door. Motion detected, back door. Oh fuck. The screen door cracked, and now a tremendous banging rang out from the front porch. Panicking, I tried to do too many things at once. I was trying to dial 911, but instead clicked the camera app open. A large man was plying away at the hinges of the front door with a crowbar. He was brawn and tall. On his face was a grinning skull balaclava. I was about to piss myself. He would be in seconds. I nearly fell down the stairs, and then I was face to face with the door. All I could hear was the clanging as balaclava man beat his way inside. The hinges were bent, ready to burst. I am not some sort of action hero. I was an idiot scared out of his mind, and faced with a home invasion I felt like I had no way of handling. I did the only thing I thought made sense. I fired 5 times into the door. The gun wasn't all that powerful, it was a 9mm, but it made a hell of a lot of noise. For an instant I even felt some relief, because I knew someone, even in this bad neighborhood, would soon call the police for me. The banging stopped and I heard a groaning from behind the front door. I opened it and found the man gasping on the ground, chest full of holes. Shockingly, the screen door was still partially intact. That's how I saw the reflection of another figure behind me. This one was skinnier. A rail of a person covered with tattoos. Their face was pale white, beyond the natural human skin color. Their lips were strangely feminine, but the blank features left me completely unsettled. The intruder was wearing something like this. A heavy metallic object struck the back of skull with a wet thud. The figure pulled me back into the house. It struck me again, this time in the face, and I crumpled to the floor. There was little pain, it was all disorientation. I didn't lose consciousness, but I was concussed. Looking up, I saw the pale face above me. It had hit me with a metal detector. "Where is it?" a male voice shouted. Then, grabbing me off the floor, "Where the fuck is IT?" What? I stuttered out, barely able to comprehend what was happening. "Where's what?" Seeing I was in no condition to talk, he let me crumple and began pacing the floor, unsure of what to do. He ripped off his mask to reveal a bony, hard face glistening with sweat. A teardrop tattoo rested on his cheek. In the far distance, I thought I could hear sirens. My vision was heavily blurred and the lights of the house made my head split. Then, the man started tearing the house apart. He pulled the cushions off the couch, swept ants off the kitchen counter, and about destroyed the shoe closet. It was nearly comical. He turned his attention toward the basement. "It's got to be there," he murmured, eyeing the dog gate that led to the basement. He opened it and charged down. The next thing I heard was yelping and a splattering sound, followed by a series of barks and yips. With a grunt I forced myself off the floor and just barely made it down the stairs, gun in hand. The intruder was trying desperately to shield his throat from Lucy, who was snapping at his arm with a kind of animal ferocity we all forget that dogs have. The man's shoulder was already gashed to hell and bleeding profusely. A luminescent blue vein hung limply out of it. Coco clung viciously to his pants leg, refusing to let him go. Fuck, get off me," he screamed, ignorant of my presence. I know that shooting people is supposed to be hard, but in this scenario, the only trouble I had was aiming. I was concussed, scared, and angry all at once. These fuckers had been in the house for God knows how long, and they had scared the absolute shit out of me and the dogs. I emptied 7 rounds into his gut. At the sound of the gunfire, the dogs yelped and dashed away. Thankfully, I didn't hit them. The man first bolted up, eyes wide, then wheeled and stumped against the wall. I kept firing an empty pistol at his twitching figure. And then the cop shot me. I didn't hear them break down the door, I didn't hear anyone shout for me to drop the gun, and I'll be damned if I heard the actual report of the pistol. Thankfully, the cop only hit me once and didn't fire at any of the dogs, who were barking madly and dashing around the room. Before I passed out, I felt Lucy's tongue lapping my face. I woke up in the hospital a day later, IVs connected to my arm and oxygen running through my nose. As my condition improved, I learned a series of terrible revelations. I'll try to summarize them briefly here. My brother was not a businessman as he had led my family to believe. Instead, he and his fiancée had been working as accountants for a large drug operation in the city for the past 5 years. It was good money, but it was of course a massive risk. My brother was also not on vacation, but instead was laying low in order to avoid being found because he had stolen a briefcase of cocaine from the people he worked for that was valued at about $120,000. The cocaine was in the house with me the whole time because, as my brother said at his trial, he believed the dealers wouldn't look for it there if he himself was gone. The people who had attacked us were trying to locate that case, which it turned out had enough metal be detected. They had to be careful not to spook me, the dogs, or any neighbors if they hoped to find it. As it turned out, it was in my brother's disgusting bedroom in a hidden compartment inside their dresser. His plan was to come back a week or so later, collect his money. Even if I had been killed, it was hidden well enough to go unfound, and get the hell out of the state as fast as he could. In his plan, I was an expendable patsy. The man who I shot through the front door was the muscle of the operation. He probably wasn't supposed to step foot in the house unless something bad happened. When I discovered the upstairs window, he sprung into action to stop me from alerting the police. The police found an SUV down the road that he was operating from. He lived. The skinny mask guy died. He was the brains of the operation. It was him who set up the firmware that caused the cameras in the house to register motion every few minutes. He also cracked open the upstairs window and was using the metal detector to search through the house each night. Additionally, he was drugging Lucy and Coco's food with a sedative each day in order to make them sluggish. It terrifies me to this day that he was able to move so freely throughout the house without my noticing. I assume he was there for the majority of the week. The dogs must have sensed him, but he was apparently very good at staying under the radar as he moved, unseen, through the house I was bunkered down in. That's the end of my story. I was a suspect for a bit, but eventually all evidence pointed to me being nothing more than a red herring and a patsy. My brother and his fiancée both went to prison on felony drug trafficking charges. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to talk to them again, but I have at least 2 decades to make that decision. The whole thing messed me up pretty badly. Eventually I copied my brother's idea and left the state forever. The man I killed might have friends who want revenge. But if anyone ever does come back for me, if they track me down and invade my home, I won't worry too much. Because every night when I go to sleep, I have old Lucy and Coco by my side. And the 9mm on my nightstand doesn't hurt either. One of my childhood homes had a balcony that was attached to both my mother's bedroom and mine via big, glass doors in each of our rooms. Next to the balcony are 2 trees, one I often used to climb up and down from the balcony. One night when my brother and mother went home and I was about 13, reading in bed with a very dim reading light, I heard what sounded like something moving in one of the trees outside, but this didn't worry me as possums and bats are common in our area. Now I had thin curtains on the glass doors that separated my room and the balcony, and the doors faced out towards the street where street lamp light was always visible through my curtains. Shortly after hearing the tree rustling noises, I see a shadow slowly move past the doors, at which point I immediately turn off my reading light and freeze like a deer in headlights. The shadow is tall, so it wasn't a neighbor kid and it wasn't my all of 5 feet mother. The person moved slowly, creeping as though they were trying to not be noticed. They wouldn't likely be able to see into my room, but I could see them thanks to the street lights behind them. They moved past my doors out of sight. I sat there unable to move or even think about what to do other than be absolutely still. That is, until I heard another sound, the sound of someone trying to open a glass door, my mum's doors to the balcony. I didn't know if she had locked them or not, but I wasn't taking chances. I moved as quickly and as silently as I could to my bedroom door and locked it. I listened for what the person was doing now. They were still jiggling the glass door handle, but it sounded like the doors weren't opening. I felt relief. This person couldn't get in surely. All I had to do was wait for them to realize that and then they would leave, right? Well, I heard light footsteps move back along the balcony to my set of glass doors until I saw his shadow stop directly in front of them. Again, I froze. He couldn't see me. He couldn't know I can see him. I saw a shadow of a hand reach up to my door's handle and my heart stopped. Had I actually locked those doors myself today? I was out there earlier. What if I forgot? The seconds leading up to him grabbing the handle felt like an eternity. But thankfully, when this person tried to open the door, it did not open. It was locked. I sighed such a sigh of relief I was worried he had heard it. After this he began pacing the length of the balcony. I didn't have a mobile. The landline was at the other end of the house, but I was scared to take my eyes off of them. I was silently crying and praying they would just leave. Then I heard him stop moving. He then said I could just break the glass, you know. Before I could even process this, I saw car headlights turn around the corner of my street and then stop at our property gate. My mum was home. The person on balcony moved out of sight and I heard a loud thump as they jumped off of it. When my mum came inside, I was hysterical and was barely coherent in telling her what happened. Eventually I got the message across and she called the police. They never found or caught anyone, but a neighbor reported a truck in the street that matched the description of a truck that had been reported recently for attempted child abductions near my school a block away. I was sitting in the kids' bedroom, putting them to sleep. My husband in the living room working. The house was pretty quiet. We heard someone turn the knob on the back door and bump it hard twice, as if trying to shove the door open. My husband brought me the shotgun and went exploring outside with the pistol. He was a county reserve cop at the time. Never did see anyone. The weird thing. I usually don't end up locking the doors until we go to bed, usually a couple hours after the kids, but for some reason I had a nagging feeling to lock it early that night. If I hadn't, God knows what would have happened. It was obvious that we were home and at least someone was awake. Husband had kitchen and living room lights on, so whatever they wanted was not just to take things. He spoke with his fellow officers, but nothing was ever found. He did find a footprint by the garage the next morning. Was way too big to have been his. We waited and waited for a follow-up break-in, and it never happened. I am a stay-at-home mom, so I kept the pistol within reach for a while, when the kids were in school and I was home alone. Nothing like that has ever happened again, however. A few months later my 11-year-old son did move out of his bedroom because he felt like he was being watched. Said he kept hearing footsteps outside his windows. Before we moved in, his room was a back porch that the previous owners had boxed in. The old concrete porch steps are still outside his room and lead to a big window the previous owners put in. It doesn't open. I'm sure it could have been neighborhood stray cats, but this was just a few months after the door incident.